Pick up an apple, hold it for a moment. It's round, uniformly red, not a mark on it. It smells faintly of something sweet, something clean. It feels like the most natural object in the world. It isn't. The apple in your hand does not exist in nature. It never has. What you are holding is a manufactured thing. Not in the way a bottle is manufactured, but in a way that is, somehow, stranger. It is a living organism that has been engineered over centuries to stop being fully alive. It cannot reproduce itself. If you planted its seeds, the tree that grew would produce something almost unrecognizable, small, bitter fruit, closer to a wild crab apple than to anything in a store. The apple you are holding was not grown from a seed. It was copied. It is a clone of a clone of a clone, sustained by a surgical procedure humans have been performing without interruption for approximately 3,800 years. You have eaten this thing your entire life. You have never really looked at it. Here's what happens when you plant an apple seed. Apples are genetically chaotic in a way that almost no other cultivated plant is. The technical term is extreme heterozygosity. What it means, practically, is that apple seedlings almost never resemble their parents. Plant a seed from the apple in your hand, and the tree that grows will likely produce something small, hard, and astringent. Without human intervention, roughly 1 in 100 apple seedlings produces fruit worth eating. Humans solved this problem with a technique called grafting. You cut a branch, called a scion, from a tree that produces the fruit you want. You slice open the root system of a different tree and press the branch into it. You bind the wound and wait. If it takes, the cells fuse. The bark flows together. The resulting tree grows the fruit of one organism, rooted in the body of another. Every commercial apple tree on Earth was made this way. Every Fuji, every Gala, every Honeycrisp. The Granny Smith traces back to a single tree, found growing near a creek in New South Wales, Australia, around 1868. The origins of that tree are uncertain, half documented, half legend. But every Granny Smith that has ever existed, anywhere in the world, is a genetic copy of that one accidental moment. One tree, replicated endlessly across continents for more than 150 years. That apple stopped evolving the moment we decided it was good enough. And so it stays, not changing, not reproducing, just being copied across every orchard on Earth. Alive but frozen, the same organism, multiplied under 100 different names. Before all of this, before orchards, before grafting, before supermarkets, there was a forest. In the Tian Shan Mountains of Kazakhstan, wild apple trees grow in tangled, uneven groves. Each tree is a unique genetic individual. Different sizes, different colors, different flavors, sometimes all on the same tree. Scientists confirmed through DNA analysis that these trees, Malus sieversii, are the primary ancestor of every domestic apple on Earth. Almaty, Kazakhstan's largest city, likely takes its name from Alma, the Kazakh word for apple. The fruit may have given the city its name before either of them left the valley. The man who first identified Kazakhstan as the apple's origin was a botanist named Nikolai Vavilov. He visited the wild forests in the early 20th century and was, by his own account, astounded. Trees growing densely, unevenly, every variation of fruit imaginable. He identified this place as the genetic birthplace of the apple. He was later arrested by Stalin's government for advocating genetics. Imprisoned. He died of starvation in a Soviet prison in 1943. The forest he found is almost gone. A 2022 study found that the wild apple habitat has been reduced to 7% of what it was in 1930. 90% of what existed near Almaty in 1935 has been cleared. For housing, for grazing, for farmland. And the trees that remain face a second threat, invisible and harder to stop. Every spring, pollen from the cultivated orchards surrounding the mountain drifts up into the wild groves and cross-pollinates with the ancient trees. The genetics of the domesticated apple are slowly overwriting the genome of its own ancestor. The forest is still standing, but it is being absorbed by what came from it, dissolved quietly from within. The apple in your supermarket was most likely harvested in autumn. It has been asleep since then. In the late 1930s, a Cornell University researcher named Robert Smock traveled to Cambridge, England, to observe a preservation technology British scientists had developed. He brought it back, adapted it for American apple varieties, and changed the economics of the fruit industry permanently. The technology is called controlled atmosphere storage. Sealed warehouses. Temperature held just above freezing. Oxygen reduced from the 21% in the air you're breathing right now to approximately 2%. An atmosphere that, as the industry's own technical manuals note, will not support human life. In this environment, the apple's cellular respiration slows to almost nothing. It breathes so slowly it barely registers. Cornell's Dr. Chris Watkins, who has continued this research for decades, describes the goal plainly. The whole idea is to put the apple to sleep. And since 2002, there has been one more step. Many commercial apples are treated with a gas called 1-MCP, sold as Smart Fresh, which binds to the apple's ethylene receptors and blocks them. Ethylene is the hormone that tells a fruit it is time to ripen. 1-MCP switches that signal off permanently. The apple cannot receive the message that time is passing. It has been in a sealed room, in air humans cannot breathe, for months. Its own ripening clock has been chemically disabled. And now it is under fluorescent light in a store in March, and it smells like fruit and feels firm and looks, to every sense you have, like something fresh. The apple doesn't know what season it is. In the original Hebrew text of Genesis, the fruit that Eve takes from the tree is called peri, a generic word. It means simply fruit. No plant named, no species identified. Early scholars debated what it might have been. The fig was a strong candidate. Genesis describes Adam and Eve immediately covering themselves with fig leaves, which suggests the tree was close at hand. Pomegranates were proposed, grapes. The question was genuinely open. The apple entered the story in the 4th century, when Pope Damasus commissioned a scholar named Jerome to translate the Hebrew Bible into Latin. Jerome chose the word malum for the fruit. In Latin, malum means both apple and evil. One word, two meanings. Whether this was deliberate wordplay or an accident of language, historians still debate. What happened next is not debated. Within a few centuries, the apple was the forbidden fruit in European art, in theology, in the moral imagination of the Western world. It was the cause of original sin. The reason, in the framework of 2 millennia of Christian thought, that every person born into the world arrives already in debt. Michelangelo painted a fig tree in the Sistine Chapel, which means at least one person in the Renaissance was still paying attention to what the text actually said. Everyone else had already moved on. The apple was a choice, made by later painters, later theologians, later Sunday school teachers, or not a fact. Civilization builds enormous structures on very small foundations. A 4th century translation, a word with 2 meanings, and then, resting on that single small accident, 2,000 years of painting, of moral philosophy, of how an entire culture understands what it means to be human. Most of the people building those structures never knew what was underneath them. John Chapman was a real person. He walked the American frontier in the early 19th century, planting apple trees across Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana. He was genuinely unconventional, barefoot, rough sackcloth, preaching a theology almost nobody around him practiced. When he died in 1845, he left an estate of over 1,200 acres of nurseries. None of his apples were meant to be eaten. Chapman planted from seed deliberately. He knew the trees would produce small, bitter fruit. His customers knew it too. On the early American frontier, the apple was not a food. It was a raw material. Ohioans were drinking on average 30 gallons of hard cider per year. The apple was how you made water safe to drink, how you got through winter. Chapman was supplying a frontier alcohol industry, and everyone involved understood this. By 1904, the apple industry was already sensing that relationship had become a liability. Temperance movements were growing. Fermentation was starting to look disreputable. That year, at the St. Louis World's Fair, a Missouri fruit specialist named J.T. Stinson stood before an audience and coined a phrase as part of an explicit industry campaign to reposition the apple as a health product. An apple a day keeps the doctor away. 16 years later, Prohibition arrived. Federal agents were specifically tasked with destroying cider apple orchards, cutting the trees down, eliminating the infrastructure. The bitter, seed-grown varieties that Chapman and everyone like him had planted were systematically removed. The physical evidence of what the apple had been for generations of American life was gone. What remained was a clean story, a healthy fruit, a gentle wanderer, barefoot in a meadow, feeding the frontier one apple at a time. America forgot on purpose, and it worked so completely that the forgetting itself has been forgotten. So here's the apple. It sits in a bowl. It costs less than a coffee. It is the most ordinary object in your kitchen, or in anyone's kitchen, in almost any country on Earth. You have probably never thought about it for more than a few seconds, but it is carrying something. It carries the wound of a graft that healed. It carries the genome of a mountain forest in Kazakhstan that is almost gone, overwritten by the very trees it gave rise to. It carries months inside a sealed vault, in air no one could breathe, its own sense of time chemically switched off. It carries a 4th century translation that shaped a civilization's deepest story about what it means to be human. It carries the memory of an America that drank it, and then, when that memory became inconvenient, cut the evidence down and built a cleaner story on top of it. The apple did not choose any of this. It was pulled from a branch in autumn. It was processed and sealed and labeled and placed under light. It knows nothing of what it has been through, or what it has meant, or how many times humans have decided it needed to mean something different. That's what ordinary objects do. They carry everything and say nothing. But you know now. And the next time you hold one, really hold it, feel its actual weight. Something will be different. Not because the apple changed, but because your perspective did.